Good day to you. Today we'll be looking at stories again. We're continuing with the last story we did. Every story has characters, a setting, a story structure that makes up the story in a proper way, and then the problem. The whole story centers around a problem that needs to be solved by the characters. Right. Characters, that's the who in the story. Who is in the story? Characters are the people in the story, and then there's always a main character. This is the person whom the story is mostly about. The setting is the where in the story. Where is this happening? Right. It could be at home, it could be in the park, at school, at the beach, at the rock pool. It could be in your room, it could be in space. Right. It all depends on the story and the author, the person who writes it. Now, the story structure is very much like building a burger. Right. You have to start by first the beginning, and that is where you have, for in your head, you can see like a burger bread. So you put your bread first, that's where you have to begin. You cannot start without setting a base for your story. This is where we find the characters being introduced to them there, and or most of them. Some of them you will find later in the story, but at this stage, we're looking at the characters that are mostly found in the beginning. The setting of where does this happen, and often it also tells you when does this happen. Was it on a summer day? Was it in spring? Was it in winter? Was it at night? um, it tells you all these things. It sets the stage. It actually gives you a good picture of where the story is going to unfold. Then in the middle, now this is where you start building your burger. This is where you put all the juicy ingredients that makes this burger so yummy. Okay. So in the middle, you will find most of the story. It will tell you what the characters do, what they think, where they're going, and of course, the biggest of that is what is the problem that needs to be solved? These characters have to work from here, like identify the problem and start working to solve the problem. Now, by the ending part of it, you will be looking at how this problem is eventually solved. We always try to solve this problem. Sometimes it works out well, most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. But you have to try, right? Now, the ending, no burger is complete without the last piece on top. This is your ending. You need to top up your and close up your burger before you can think of eating it. Right, let's move on at right. The problem. What is the problem? It's not always a problem like you might think. The story presents a problem for the main character to solve. The problem is a situation that bothers or upsets a character. It's just an uncomfortable situation or something that makes you think like, how shall we change the situation and make it better? Or how shall we get to where we want to be? A problem in a story can be like a real life problem, especially if the genre is realistic fiction, like we are currently doing with Penny. So the beginning is where it introduces the story, introduces the characters. It often tells you where the story takes place or the setting, also the when in the story, sometimes, mostly. The middle, that's where we will be getting today in our story. The middle is where almost everything the story is about happens. It explains the topic, it gives important key details, meaning telling you more about this, the topic of the story and the person in the story. It tells you a lot more things that only the author knows. And if you don't know it, you won't understand him. So they have to tell you all these little details, and you can continue building your little picture in your head. This holds the reader's attention. You think, this sounds interesting. I wonder what's next. Right. This part is then centered around the problem and the ways in which the character attempts to solve the problem. So next week we'll be looking at the ending, but I'll keep that for next week. Right. Let's go to our story, Benny and the Sea Monster, and see what happens today. Right. Last week we looked at the characters, as we said. The characters in this story is Benny, of course, Jada, and her dad, Uncle Tay. Right. The setting we found was definitely on the beach because they say they are sitting on a beach towel, and that is where you find the rock pools, the tide pools that they want to go have a look at, or that Jada is very keen to look at. I don't know so much about Benny. All right, let's continue today. So we remember the rock, the tide pools with all the sea creatures inside, and to Benny, they look like sea monsters because he's not really a fan of these little creatures. All right, let's go on to today. Right. Benny started to squirm as he bent to squat by one of the pools. If he could go home right now, he would not have to see any horrible sea monsters. Now let's just stop here and look at the word squirm. When you squirm, it's when you are really in an uncomfortable situation. And this is when your body actually reacts and shows, I don't like this. Sometimes you might wiggle uncomfortably, you might sometimes even shake, or you might just say, ugh, and just get like a chill down your spine. It just shows you are uncomfortable. To squat means to go down like you want to sit, but you are not sitting on the floor, you're sitting on your heels. Your feet are still on the ground, and you're just sitting very, very low down so that you can get closer to the pools in this case. Right, before we go on, let's look at the word spiky. Spiky is like a needle is spiky. Anything that is sharp is spiky, and we know spiky can hurt, right? Spiky means covered with points, sharp points. Okay, continue. Look, Uncle Tay said, those spiky purple things are sea urchins. They look like plants, but they are animals. Remember not to touch the creatures. It is against the rules, and you can hurt them. You can even get hurt yourself sometimes. The sea urchins waved their arms. Benny thought they looked like they wanted to pull him under the water. Uncle Tay went to look at another pool. Benny stood up to follow him, but Jada grabbed him. Monster alert! She shouted. Something small and red popped under a rock in the pool. It had a giant blob of a head. Its 8 long arms waved quietly in the water like thick red spaghetti noodles. Oh! Penny stepped backwards. Jada laughed again. It is just a baby octopus, silly. Its legs are called tentacles, she said. If they grab you, they will not let go. Benny shook his head. He looked worried. Scaredy cat, Jada teased. I'm not afraid, Benny shouted. Suddenly, Jada cried out, Oh no! The octopus! That bird is going to eat it! Right. Now, in this story, part of the story, we have reached the middle now. This is where we already know the problem. We know that Benny has a fear of these tide pools. He is not liking any of these sea creatures. We learned that he doesn't like slimy creatures, and most of these creatures are just that. Right, Benny worries about the tide pool grow in the middle part of the story. Underline some words or sentences that tell you this. Now, if he is scared of it, it shows in things that he does and reactions that he has. Now, we learned the word squirm immediately shows you his body language, as we say. You can see in his body he doesn't like these creatures. Okay, so Benny started to squirm. That is one of the sentences that tell us he squirmed when he got to the pools, right? The other one we can find is this is what Benny thinks. So here, his body does something. This is what he does. Here, Benny thinks. The author tells us what he thinks. Benny thought they looked like they wanted to pull him underwater. They are tiny creatures, but this is in his mind because he's scared. Then, if we move down, we see she tells him about the octopus. He obviously doesn't like this at all. What does he do? Oh, he sounds very yucky to him and also scary. That's a scary outlet. Ah, Benny stepped backwards. So he steps back because he wants to move away. Right. And then the obvious words that we see here, he looked worried. Definitely, there is no two ways about it that tells you this is what he doesn't like. So let's move on. I want to get rid of this. Okay. Now, the next part is what does Jada do to make Benny's problem worse? Circle paragraphs that support your answer. Now, in the previous part of the story, in the beginning part, we saw how Jara keeps teasing him to actually scare him more. So it's not helping his bad situation that he's in, right? There's nothing worse than when you are scared of something and other people think it's funny. Nobody can think how you feel. And that's unfortunate because it makes it worse for you as the person in that situation. Now they say circle paragraphs that support your answer. Now, through the whole part, we're going to look at where does she tease him. Okay, now this is Uncle Tate telling them something. Here she says, Monster alert! And it's not really a monster, but this is where she is really scaring him more just to make situation worse. And then if we move down, she calls him scaredy cat, meaning you are a scared little guy. You're like a scary cat. She teased. Okay. So these are all things that she's doing just to make matters worse, really. Right. So let's move on. Right. Let's just recap. Um, in this part is the middle part. We've already seen the beginning, so this is the middle. The end is still coming. The problem we all know now is Benny that is afraid of the sea monsters, as he calls them. We will see how they are starting to solve this problem. Here he already says, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Okay, so he's starting to maybe think about all this. All right. And here we see something else is happening. And from here, they're going to build the end because this is going to be the turning point of this whole story. Right. Here it says, oh no, the octopus, the bird's going to eat it. So here we see that something bad is going to happen. So now the situation is getting a little more serious, and it's not any longer about Benny at this time. They worried about this little octopus. Right. We're going to see next week how this plays out. Okay. So you will go to the questions on the next on the next page, where you will, not on the next page, in the assignment page, you will leave this audio, and go complete your questions in the assignment. You have to check one answer only, and you can check back in your book or come back to the video to help you remember the answers to the questions that are there. Thank you for listening. Good luck to you. Bye.